Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tamara Ecker, Managing Director of British American Business. For those of you who are not familiar with us, we are the leading transatlantic business association supporting companies with operations in both the US and the UK markets. We run regular programs on themes impacting our member companies with a suite of approximately over 100 programs and events per year. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome you to a very special session within our Power of Purpose series in partnership with Brandpie. We know that purpose in business is a cross-cutting theme, and today we are lucky to have with us a fantastic panel of sustainability leaders from businesses who connect purpose and sustainability to align their organizations and drive positive impact. Our Power of Purpose series is made possible thanks to the partnership and support of BAB member Brandpie. And we are also thrilled to have speakers today from BAB members AIG, EY, and Standard Chartered Bank, who will all be properly introduced in just a moment. To moderate today's conversation, it is my pleasure to introduce Louisa Harris, Head of Sustainability and Systems Change at Brandpie. Louisa leads Brandpie's sustainability and system change practice and has worked in sustainable business for 15 years with a background in strategy, non-financial reporting, and ESG assurance. Her work currently focuses on transformation, responsible leadership, and culture change to influence systems change. Louisa, we're in good hands with you, and I'm going to hand over.
Thank you so much for such a kind and warm welcome. And hi, everybody. My name is Louisa Harris. Just before I dive in, a couple of house rules for today. So we're going to run about 35 minutes in discussion with the panel, and then the rest of the time will be for Q&A. But if questions come up as we're going, please just pop them in the chat and I'll try and weave them into the discussion. If you're not talking, please keep your microphones on mic. That will really help with the recording, and we will record the session and that will be available afterwards. So thanks, Tamara, for having us. And like you say, Brandpie have been sponsoring the Power of Purpose series, which we run once a quarter and have been doing so for about 6 years, bringing together different members of the C-suite to explore what purpose can drive. And so it's a real pleasure to do an Earth Day special and celebration of Earth Month, where we're talking to different sustainability leaders on the power of purpose and really how this can drive sustainability and systems change. So on our panel, we have Amy Brachio, Global Vice Chair of Sustainability for EY, Marisa Drew, CSO for Standard Chartered Bank, and Jen Waldner, CSO of American International Group. And I'll hand over to all of you to introduce yourselves in a minute, but I just wanted to start with a finding from some of the research we've done here at Brandpie recently. So every year we do a Purpose CEO report, and last year our findings found we interviewed 4,000 CEOs about purpose. And of those 4,000, 89% say that they had a purpose, but only 41% of them said that their purpose helps them to become a more sustainable business. So there's an interesting disconnect there. So maybe, Marisa, if I start with you, what would be great is if you could introduce yourself and your role, but also to bring in the topic, tell us a little bit about how purpose drives sustainable outcomes in your organization.
Sure, with pleasure. I'm very, very happy to be here. Thank you for having me. So yes, as introduced, I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer for Standard Chartered Bank. And I view my role as really having two parts to it in a way. So 50% of what I do, or half of my brain, is focused on us as an organization. So it's the setting our sustainability strategy, our ambition, our public commitments, how we communicate about sustainability as a company. But then the other half of what I do is look after our sustainable finance practice. So this is everything that we do for and on behalf of clients. So it's infusing sustainability in how we show up with our clients, how we serve them, everything from the provision of capital to advisory services. And the way this connects into our purpose is that we have what we call a brand promise. And our tagline very affectionately says that we are here for good. And the here for good is a double entendre. So it's here to do good and to make an impact. But here for good also means longevity for us. So we are a UK listed PLC bank. And our heritage is as a trade bank. So we're operating in 52 footprint markets across the world. And in so many of those markets, we're very heavily dominated by developing economies. And we've been there more than 100 years. So that double entendre starts with a little bit of how we think about ourselves. And then we express our purpose in the form of what we call our bold stands. And those stands are how do we want to show up in the world for the longer term. And this is a little bit of a rallying cry for our 85,000 employees to think about the North Star of us as a bank. Those three stands are: number one, accelerating zero. So that very much speaks to the drive to reduce carbon emissions and fight climate change, or be a part of addressing climate change. The second stand is lifting participation. So it's really all about financial inclusion and making sure that the economies that we operate in ultimately are inclusive and speak to helping our companies, our markets, and people in those countries prosper. And then the final one is resetting globalization. Again, speaking to us very much as a trade bank and our history and our heritage. We believe that globalization is not a bad word. The world is incredibly interconnected. And the fact that we have had strong globalization has lifted people out of poverty, it has developed economies, and it ensures that the goods and services that we all want to consume move around the world and can get to the places where they're needed most. So that's how this all relates to our company. And I think it's probably somewhat self-evident that sustainability ripples then through everything we do and how we think about ourselves.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We'll definitely pick up on some more of that a little bit later. But Jen, can I hand over to you to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thank you, Louisa. It's great to be here today. I'm Jen Waldner with AIG. I'm based in Houston, Texas. For those of you who are not familiar with AIG, we're a global property and casualty insurance company. As Louisa shared, I serve as its Chief Sustainability Officer, where I'm responsible for the development and implementation of AIG's company-wide sustainability strategy. And similar to what Marisa shared, to me, corporate purpose represents a company's North Star. That's certainly true for AIG. I think corporate purpose and sustainability really go hand in hand. And at AIG, a few years ago, we launched a new corporate purpose, which is to discover new potential by reimagining what AIG can do for you. And as a 100-plus-year-old insurance company, this is really inspiring. I think, this is punchy, it was modern, and frankly inspiring, especially for those of us who've been at the company for a while, coming out of COVID. There's been a lot of corporate change. I think that our corporate purpose has really empowered us to identify opportunities across the organization, but also really underscoring our commitment to be more client, community, and customer-centric. And so that's been so helpful to us. To support our purpose, we've also come up with a set of values that set clear expectations for what it means to work at AIG, that also encourage behaviors that I think are really required to drive sustainable change. And so these values that we set are very simple. They're taking ownership, setting the standard, winning together, being an ally, and doing what's right. These values are very authentic to AIG. Again, they're very simple. And I think they help to amplify our strengths and can be really easily integrated into our day-to-day activities and processes. And I, would say that why I feel like this has been successful is because it's infused into all parts of our corporate communication and culture from the top down. And it's something that we take pride in sharing with our stakeholders. And so as an example of how we're infusing these values into our business from our sustainability office, we actually use these values to articulate our approach to sustainability. So we talk about taking ownership. For us, that is that we want to be our best own credential. We want to really focus on operating sustainably, and we're going to have those expectations of our customers and others in our value chain. We want to set the standard because we feel like it's important to engage with our clients and other stakeholders to understand their ESG goals and the risk that they face. And this then in turn allows us to think about the development of innovative products and services where we can really provide high quality solutions to our clients. We want to win together because I think we recognize that as an organization, we cannot solve these complex challenges alone. And so we want to continue to engage with our stakeholders and really be a partner on their sustainability journeys, because we know if we can help our clients and others in our value chain be successful in meeting their sustainability goals, that enables us to further reach our goals. We want to be an ally because we want to focus on providing sound governance, building an inclusive workforce, and really helping our clients and other stakeholders navigate these kind of ever-changing and interrelated set of risks. And then finally, the most important value I think that we have, the one that resonates most with me, is doing what's right. Because that means no matter what we're doing, no matter what we're faced with, we need to trust our gut to do what's right, whether it's tackling climate change, creating a more inclusive workforce, or anything else that we're doing to support the communities where we operate, where our employees work and live. To me, all of these values help to reinforce our purpose. And this in turn helps to unify our work and ensure that we're all really marching in the same direction.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'm really pleased you're already bringing in values, behavior, and collaboration, because those are definitely things we'll unpack in the conversation. Amy, I get the pleasure of getting to talk to you about purpose and sustainability quite a lot, so I'd love to hear some more from you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I'm Amy Brachio, and I'm EY's Global Vice Chair for Sustainability. And as you've heard, that can mean different things with different organizations. And so, first of all, if you're not familiar with EY, we're one of the big professional services organizations. So we help our clients, whether it's through audit or tax or strategy and transactions or consulting on a myriad of topics. When I think about my role, I think about it in three categories. And actually, it's very similar to what Marisa described. So I have responsibility for EY's own commitment to sustainability. We're a large, complex organization. Now, we don't manufacture anything, right? But we do travel, we do have a real estate footprint, and we do have ways to reduce our own emissions, as well as advance the knowledge that drives a lot of, say, standard setting and things like that. We also help our clients, and we help our clients through bringing expertise around sustainability. But Marisa, also, like you talked about, by embedding sustainability in so much of what we do. So if someone wants to talk to us about how they transform their procurement function, you need to think about sustainability. You need to think about confidence in reporting, things like that. And then lastly, and I know we'll get more into the talent topic, also engaging with our people on the topic of sustainability. Our people are really interested in engaging on this topic, and we want to hire and attract and retain the best talent in the marketplace. And so that's really important to us. My whole career, in hindsight, has been focused on topics that bring together purpose and business opportunity. And I don't think I knew that at the time. But I did a lot of work around consumer protection and banking in my earlier years of my career, cybersecurity, business resilience, and now sustainability. And what I love about those things is they put together purpose with business opportunity, and that's just very motivating. We at EY are a purpose-driven organization, and we have been for about 12 years. And I'll tell you, 12 years ago, when we said that we were moving from quality in everything we do to building a better working world, many of us were like, what are we even talking about? Like, why? How do we tell our clients we're building a better working world? But our CEO at the time, I think in hindsight, was a real visionary, because what he said was, I can't think about what we do until I'm clear on why we do it. And so the building a better working world is that galvanizing why that we have. And what it ultimately ended up doing was codifying this fact that we can bring together doing good and purpose-driven work with business opportunity. So just some examples are, like, earlier in my career, I've always been passionate about advancing women. And I actually love that this is a female panel chosen for our expertise, not to create a female panel. But I've always been passionate about advancing women, and it used to feel like something I did on the side, and so that sort of the firm allowed me to do. But then when we had building a better working world as our purpose, it moved towards, how do I work with my clients so that we're advancing this topic together? And we feel the same way about sustainability. It's something where we as an organization have a commitment, but also through our work with our clients, we can help them advance their purpose through bringing our knowledge to it. And so with that, Louisa, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks so much, Amy. And what I find fascinating is, for the 15 years I've worked in sustainability, I've often been battling a perception that perhaps I've chosen a less commercial career. What I do is a bit fluffy. And I think, for everyone who just listened to those introductions, I don't know if there can be any doubt in your mind that the role of the CEO is complicated, it's multidisciplinary, it's all encompassing, and it's hard hitting. And so it definitely doesn't deserve that perception. I don't know any other roles that ask so much of the people who lead it. I guess one of the things I'm curious about is, back when I started working in sustainability, most of my job was around convincing leadership teams that there was a business case for sustainability. And thankfully, we've moved on a little bit now, and I spend a lot more of my time about how much should we do? What is enough? How fast do we need to move? What is the urgency? And how do we get there? What does transformation look like? But if we think about the world we're in today and emerging from the pandemic, the fact that we have almost half of the global population going to vote this year, extreme weather conditions, the risk registers at board level are just extraordinary. And so we're starting to hear that people are rolling back on commitments, or there are board conversations on the trade-off between profit, resilience, and purpose and sustainability. And I'd just love to hear a bit more from you about, is now the time where we need business to be braver in their ambition of corporate steward? And is this at a cost of profit, or is it actually just a key to a resilient commercial business strategy? And Amy, I might just pass that straight back to you.
Yeah, certainly. So I can't recall a more complex business environment to be operating in. And when you think about the topic of sustainability, and you reference the fact that, more than half of the world's population is going through an election this year. And depending on the market you're in, it's more or less of a polarizing topic. You've got a lot of Americans here. It's a very polarizing topic here in the US, right? But at the same time, we all see and feel the impact of climate change on our daily lives and on our businesses. And so when I'm talking to clients about what are the drivers for the business case, I think it's pretty simple, actually. One, clients need to think differently about risk management around sustainability, whether that's new compliance requirements that they have, thinking about topics like greenwashing and how allegations could affect their organization, or changing physical risks. Like, do you now operate in an area where previously you didn't have to cool your factory, but now because of changing weather patterns, it's not safe for your employees unless you change the cooling system. So things like that. Then the demand from your clients is changing. And so even for us, and we're, like I said, we don't manufacture anything. We had 15,000 inquiries from clients around the world last year about our own sustainability practices, because it factors into their sustainability goals, our clients' sustainability goals. So imagine for those organizations that are manufacturing steel, that are doing logistics, that are shipping companies, the demand for a faster move to greater sustainability. So understanding that changing client demand and how you need to change to address it is critical. And then lastly, there are massive opportunities for growth. And I think all three of us have roles in which there is growth opportunities for our businesses around new products and services that we offer in this space. So when you put it in those terms, the business case then becomes a lot more clear. The other thing, and then I know my fellow panelists have amazing thoughts on this. The other thing that I think everyone's grappling with is short-term versus long-term. And what we are seeing is that more organizations are taking a step back from, I've committed to this in 2050. If we're being honest about 2050, there may not be a single employee employed today within an organization that will be there in 2050 to deliver, right? And so taking that and saying, we have this ambition for 2050, but here's what we're doing by 2030, 2035, 2040, so that you've got a clear roadmap. And I actually find I'm optimistic about this reset, because I think it means that people are really thoughtful about the hard work that it's going to take and the complexity of the situation. So I'll stop there.
Brilliant, on reasons to be hopeful. Marisa, I'll bring you in for the same question.
So first of all, at a very micro level, I do want to say, and Amy articulated how this is affecting her business. Well, we are a client of her business. So a perfect example of how we are pushing EY and then they are helping us is that we have committed to net zero as an organization. And we have set 2030 targets for our highest carbon emitting sectors. And we've done that along science-based targets. And we wanted to make sure that we had third-party assurance that would validate externally the pathways that we've selected to get down to 2030 with those emissions profiles. And we turned to our assurance provider, EY. And I guarantee you, because we had this conversation with on-the-ground teams, that this is the first time that they've been asked to assure a science-based approach to target setting. So in a funny way, the demand from me as a client is pushing her organization. We're actually helping each other, to have a very rigorous way of communicating this commitment. Then at a more micro level, to answer your question about these tensions, they are very real. And in a high inflationary environment, the short-term, long-term question and tension is very much something that we feel, and it's quite acute. So especially in our developing markets, we get these questions of, yes, I know the right way is the sustainability way, but who is supposed to pay, for instance, for the infrastructure investment in this great transition? Am I passing this down, or can I afford to pass this down to the consumer? This is at a country level. You get these types of questions when you're looking for systemic change to move into, say, the renewable space, if you are looking and acting for a company that is largely dependent on fossil fuels or coal as their primary source of energy. So these are very real questions at a very real moment, and we've got to balance those things. I think Amy said it beautifully, that all of us who've committed to net zero and are passionate about this topic, I think we all collectively, and I say the royal we, jumped into this with a great deal of ambition, but this is hard, right? If it were easy, we would have done it. And this is a global transformation of everything we know, how business is done, our economic systems, how we value things. Systems in every way have got to transform, and that is not a simple thing. And now we've gone from ambition setting to execution, and these tensions are inevitable. But at the end of the day, if we know that we've got to get there, right? I don't think there's a question of whether. It's a question on what timescale that is orderly, that our companies and our economies can absorb, and that then it becomes something that we can process in some sort of sensible way, rather than responding to shocks. Because the alternative, if we don't go there, and here's the reason why we've got to keep on this agenda when you ask the question, do we need to be bold? If we don't do this now, if we sort of capitulate and say, I'll push it down the road further, we all know what's happening. We see it, the climate effects, they're real, they're here. We're going to lurch from a series of shocks to shocks to shocks, and that's going to be disorder, chaos, and we're going to waste a lot of money, and it's going to harm people in the process. So this is why I think it's really necessary that as leaders, we stick on this agenda and we remind ourselves of why we're doing it, and that we then navigate those trade-offs. But I think constantly, my view is, if we think about where opportunity is born, so much often it's born out of necessity. So if we look at that at all with that lens, we are creating enormous commercial opportunities. And just very quickly to give you an expression of that, we just recently launched a guide for adaptation and resilience. Why? Because we know that in addition to reducing carbon emissions, we're going to have to build resiliency, and we're going to have to adapt our businesses to deal with these realities of climate change. Yet if you ask most financial practitioners, what will they tell you? That adaptation thing, that's a job for governments. And yet the governments across the world don't have the hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars to invest in this. We need to invest in this from a commercial private sector point of view. And it isn't just a throwing good money after bad thing. It is a massive opportunity. Why? Because if we create resiliency in the companies, first of all, it's going to beget huge amounts of products and services, right? You talked about infrastructure. what are the building products that we're all going to want to buy? It's those building products that are going to make our homes safer and withstand storm activity or sea level rise. And then Jennifer can insure these companies, right? Because there'll be better credit risks. And then I can lend to them more proactively because they're better credit risks. So all of these things become self-feeding. And this is where this commercial opportunity comes in. But I think sometimes we've got to reframe the narrative. And that's what we're trying to do around this big topic of something like adaptation and resilience. Get the private financial sector to appreciate the fact that there's an enormous opportunity here. Our math tells us, we should be getting sort of a 12 times return on whether you want to call it disaster avoided or opportunity set from that investment. And that's a pretty robust ROI if we can put things in that sort of framing. So that's where we bring this intersection of some of this tension into how do we think about this from a commercially viable point of view as a private sector actor.
Thank you so much. I mean, there's a lot there, but maybe if I pick up on this point of the time is now, we have a huge opportunity, but we need bold leadership. And Jen, I'll bring you in a second on what that means for talent. I just thought for a little story to close circle though, at Brandpie, we work with EY ever since building a better working world. And, as our client, EY is constantly pushing us on what are we doing about climate change? What are we doing about DE&I? And as a really small organization, actually, that's been really powerful ammunition for me to go to our board and make changes because our clients are asking it. So we've got a nice little ecosystem for me. From a talent perspective, we know talent wants to work for business that aligns with their values. Paul Pullman, former Unilever CEO, commissioned a survey last year of 4,000 employees in the UK and the US. And what that found was 2/3 of employees are anxious about climate change, and they really want to work for organizations that give them an opportunity to contribute to making a positive impact. Over half of those respondents also said they were likely to quit if working for a company that didn't align with their values and had ethical concerns about. I'm just conscious when I think about the kind of organizations the three of you represent that you have phenomenal small dedicated sustainability teams, both in-house and client-facing. But in reality, that's quite a small fraction of the population of the business. And given the scale of the challenges that we've outlined between us, we need everyone. So what can we do to really, I suppose, help everyone in an organization connect purpose to the sustainability agenda, but really connect that to their role and their skill set so that we're doing our very best to empower a culture of change makers where everyone can contribute? And Jen, I'd love to bring you in on that.
Yeah, thanks, Louisa. I think this really resonates with me because our sustainability office is a team of 4 people. And so we're not able to make progress on our sustainability goals without the help of many people across our company, like from all parts of our business, across all of our regions, every level of the company. We've also made some net zero commitments and kind of to build on what Marisa shared, the easy part is making the commitment. The much more challenging part of it, how do you operationalize that? How do you really bring that into the fold of your business and make sure that everyone in the organization has some level of accountability for how we're going to achieve these really significant goals? And so for us at AIG, we've really been prioritizing the upskilling of our colleagues on ESG issues, not just to make sure they're aware of our own sustainability strategy, but also what is the application to their respective roles. And so I really think that, when we think about engaging our workforce, building our colleagues' ESG knowledge is really a natural starting point for us, because I think the greater the ESG IQ of our colleagues, the more opportunities there really are to inspire them to think about how our company can operate sustainably, but also I think that helps spur innovation, it builds morale, and it really, there's just a number of positive outcomes that we can glean from that. And so for the last several years, we have been trying to, offer kind of bespoke training, and we've really seen an increase in requests for this kind of sustainability education, so much so that we really had to think about how do we really scale this. And so last year we launched an ESG training library within our organization, online courses that our employees could access at any time, anywhere. And really we kind of focused it on 3 areas: sustainability foundation, where our colleagues who are just getting started can really try to understand, why are we focused on these issues? What does that really mean for our organization and globally? We also have a section on sustainable business practices, so employees can really look and see, what part of the business they represent, whether it's technology or underwriting or finance, and and really take a deeper dive into how their specific area can be impacted and what they can do to make a difference. We also launched a climate change masterclass last year in partnership with an NGO, Earthwatch. That's a 4-part series that our employees could take part in. They participated in all 4 classes. They could earn a certificate of completion. And I think that really incentivized them to really get involved as well. And so that education, I think, is really critical so that we're all going to have a similar starting point. Additionally, we've been really working to enhance our ESG governance structure to create that further engagement and accountability. So last year, we launched an ESG steering committee that's kind of a cross-functional executive-led group that really serves as an advisory board to our CEO. They formulate recommendations on ESG-related strategies, policies, our risk appetite. And then under that steering committee, we have a number of working groups. Some are kind of regional and subsidiary level, but we have 3 key working groups that sort of address the pillars that we think are important as an insurance company to focus on our sustainability journey. And so we're focused on our own operations, our underwriting, and our investments. And so each of those groups is really rolling up their sleeves and helping us to think through, how do we really further integrate this into our business? How do we build out our net zero roadmap in these areas? And so that's been so helpful to really kind of share their responsibility, because our sustainability office really doesn't own any of these issues. We're the convener of these issues, but it's really our colleagues in the business that are doing this from day to day that have sort of that direct accountability for helping us see these goals through. Finally, maybe just to share that, we see our colleagues and leaders in many different places on their personal sustainability journeys. And so we really try to meet them where they're at. And we also look to invest in initiatives where we have these existing champions, those who already see the connection between business goals and sustainability goals. And then we really work to build our engagement from there.
Wonderful, thanks, Jen. And I'd just maybe like to bring one thing through that you just said on that point of champions before I come to you, Amy, because one of the things we often do at Brandpie when we go into a client is we do a lot of focus groups, and often that is talking about sustainability. And what I find extraordinary is we often find employees believe the company has a top line leadership position on sustainability, but the 2 stumbling blocks we find is they don't believe in their day-to-day role, they have the opportunity to contribute. But the other thing we often find, and I've experienced this lots in my life, is that sustainability champions are often doing it in their lunch times, their evenings, their weekends. They don't have the blessing of their managers. In fact, perhaps it holds them back from progression because they're not seen as ruthlessly commercial. So Amy, you've got some fantastic programs at EY. I'd love to hear a bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, and this is going to build really on what Jen shared and Louisa, what you shared. So as I mentioned at the beginning, our workforce is looking for an opportunity to engage around sustainability. And so we did some work where we looked at, we do a lot of different things, right? We're big, I'm sure other organizations feel the same. So I wanted to really understand what mattered when we were recruiting talent and what mattered in retaining high performers. And so what we found was, with respect to recruiting, it's all about what we as EY put out there with respect to what we do around sustainability. It's the fact that it matters to our CEO. It's the level of engagement we have with external bodies on this topic, things like that. So things recruits can see and kind of validate in what they do in their research. When it comes to retention, it was essentially 3 things. And these are a really nice tie to what Jen and you, Louisa, said. So one is everyone has real appetite for learning. And so we have learning curriculums that go from a 30-minute, you just want to learn a little bit more about the language, available to all, to a badging system where you take a certain amount of learning and a certain amount of experience and you get a badge in things like circular economy or sustainable finance or climate change, up to offering a master's program with Hult University that anyone around the world can go for. The next and then we also do learning for your job, right? So what does it mean if you're an auditor versus supply chain versus tax, et cetera? The next is leadership exemplification. And so, Louisa, this gets to your point. And when we originally heard that, we thought, oh, we're in really good shape. Our CEO is out there, really committed. Leadership exemplification to the vast majority of our people means their line manager. And so is their line manager supportive of their focus on sustainability and living what we say as an organization? Then the next was opportunities to engage. But along with that opportunity to engage, you also have to have recognition that it's appreciated. So that's sort of to your point. It can't be seen that if you do something through our corporate social responsibility program, that that's not going to be recognized. So we've done some things around that where we do have formal recognition programs, but we also have things like we call it EY Connect Day, where the expectation of the whole firm on an EY Connect Day is to be giving back to our communities. And so that way, you know, it's recognized because the firm has allocated those days to that. So just a few things on the talent agenda where what we've seen is if you do those things, they actually do impact engagement scores and retention, which, you know, drives a business result and greater employee experience.
Amazing. And I think one thing I've learned from you as well is that, you know, our learning as sustainability leaders is never done. So, you know, Amy was posting on LinkedIn, I did the master's last year. So I think if you think this is a career where you do your degree and your learning is done and you just get on with it, it's definitely not the case. Maybe just, we've talked a bit about purpose and sustainability through a few lenses, particularly in the connectivity, the commercial case and the talent and retention piece. But one of the things that's really close to my heart is who should your purpose really serve? So if we're getting all of this right and we've got a strong commercial imperative, we've got engaged talent working well, where should we be seeing, what's the potential for systems change and mobilizing the business ecosystem to make some of these more seismic shifts we know are needed? Marisa, I'll bring you in on that.
Well, we've been quite deliberate about that, actually. We set out in our long-term incentive plan for our executive management what would be maybe arguably an unusually soft metric, which is to show sustainability leadership in helping to develop the ecosystem. So that sort of answers your question. The ecosystem really is a broad church. It's employees, it's your stakeholders, it's the economies and communities that you work in, and so on. But the idea here is that we do believe that we've got the power as a large institution that mobilizes capital at scale to help support systems change. And that could be the maturation of key sustainability topics, which are critical, that are very nascent, like nature, right? Nature was sort of not one of these things that in the corporate context we thought was part of our purpose, or in a financial services context that, you know, the dollar for a commercial actor should be applied to conservation, and yet it's critical to help stave off climate change, and we're reframing that narrative. There are some very specific examples, and since we are British American organization, maybe I can give you one that I particularly think illustrates this. And that is something called the Just Energy Transition Partnerships. And this was the idea that host governments, and both the US and the UK have been involved in this, where they took a look at this journey that a lot of us have been on for a very long time in the West, and said, how can we apply a number of the lessons learned, plus capital, toward developing economies to help them create systemic change in their energy mix. So the JETP construct was to select a number of developing market economies who are solely dependent or principally dependent on coal, and use our power of resources collectively, both public and private sector, sponsored by a host government, to help those countries shift away from heavy coal into renewables. So the US and Japan are working with Indonesia, the UK is working with South Africa, and these are billions and billions of dollars have been committed, but it's also the energy of actors like ourselves, public and private, are saying we want to drive change. And frankly, if we don't bring the developing world along with us, it's sort of game over anyway. So, you know, can't we do something at that sort of very, very big level with this power of collaboration that all of our partners have been talking about?
Wonderful. And just on that point of kind of collaboration versus competition, I think we often hear like we can't work with our competitors. We need to have the competitive advantage. We need to be in a category of one, particularly in our brand world, we hear that a lot. And, just to throw in a little nerdy fact into the conversation, like the etymology of competition is from the Latin competare, which means train together, because Olympic athletes became the best by working with the best. So it's actually all about striving together and seeking together. And so I'm kind of really interested in that systems change approach there. Jen,
By the way, can I tell you, being an investment banker for my career, hyper competitive, you never shared, my whole career, we never shared. And yet we all recognize that this is bigger than any one of us. And the best collaborators are actually those who we considered in theory to be historically our biggest competitors. Why? Because we're all sort of driving for that same outcome. And the collective expertise has serious power, right? It's our balance sheets or it's our intellectual capital applied to these thorny topics, which I think is, the only fighting chance that we have for these breakthroughs. So we're right there with you.
100%. And I think sustainability is one of the areas we're seeing some of the best approaches to collaboration. Jen, on that systems change point, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I absolutely agree.
Just before you go, I'm just going to do a quick shout out. Sorry about that. We're going to come to questions next. So if you do have any questions, please drop them in the chat and I'll try and group them together as we're going. Sorry, Jen.
Yeah, no worries. No, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think purpose serves all of an organization's stakeholders. And I mean, a company's purpose is really, why they exist. And I think we really started to see this paradigm shift in the way companies approach purpose back, about 5 years ago when the Business Roundtable revised their definition of the purpose of a corporation from being purely shareholder driven to this more stakeholder driven business model. And so I think stakeholder engagement, and Marisa was really alluding to this, is critical to driving systemic change, both within an organization, but also across the broader environment. And I think there's so much noise out there today, especially, and it can be really difficult to cut through it all. I mean, I think about this with the polarization of ESG, and there are many different views across all ends of the spectrum on it. And so this is where I think our organization's purpose really comes into play, because I think it helps others to understand our why, and hopefully leads to fewer distractions and gives more clarity on what we do stand for, as well as what we don't. And so I think this clarity is also helpful given a lot of the complex issues that we've been discussing, where we all have our part to play. And I agree, like there is just such power in collaboration. And I think that to see real transformational change across most of these pressing issues that impact our business, whether it's climate change or geopolitical risk or inequalities across a broad spectrum of topics, no one company, even the most impactful companies, can really tackle these issues on their own. And so the type of transformation I think is really needed to ensure the sort of widespread implementation of stakeholder capitalism practices really requires this partnership and collaboration among companies, between companies, and across all of their many stakeholders, whether it's policymakers and customers, government, civil society. I mean, we all have to be able to come together. And to do this, I think if we as individual companies can really lean into our organization's purpose, I think clearly articulate it to our stakeholders, we're better positioned to not only drive positive change within our own companies, but also really to benefit the greater good.
Oh, sorry, I'm on mute there. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm gonna jump to questions because I think that could be a topic for a whole conversation. And Astrid, I'll start with yours because I really like this. As leaders in industries critical to global sustainability, could you share one or two strategies you employ to ensure that the projects you or your clients invest in align with your company's purpose-driven goals? And I'm going to throw a bonus question into there if it's something that you can share, because I don't think we hear enough of it. Is there anything you haven't done or you've stopped doing in interest of aligning with your purpose? I'm not going to pick on you, but who'd like to jump in on that one?
I mean, I'm happy to speak to even your latter question. As we have committed to net zero, so now we get back to our purpose, that accelerating zero stand that I was describing at the outset. Accelerating zero is that global transition to net zero. We were very public, and I think probably quite forward-leaning at the time, particularly given the markets that we operate in, where we set out a goal that we would reduce and ultimately eliminate all coal financing. So I think that's a perfect example of things that we aren't doing. And it may be one thing to say if you are a Western-oriented company who your markets are largely off coal. Think about our organization. We're operating in places where coal is the predominant source of energy. It's powering factories, it's the energy mix, et cetera. So for us to say that, this is our scope 3 emissions, so it's all of our lending capital. We're saying we won't lend to those who aren't on the transition journey, and then ultimately, we'll exit that business. So that was a pretty, serious thing for us to consider, but we believe that it's absolutely the right answer, for the global society, but also, it's very, very aligned with our purpose. So maybe that's at least one expression of how we put that into practice in real terms.
Yeah, brilliant, fantastic. And just another little kind of side language point, Marisa and I were talking about this, and I think when you're working with different markets, really checking the privilege of the language we have around sustainability and purpose, even something as simple as if we talk about purpose as our North Star, it's not the North Star.
Right.
If you're talking to the so
and also, it's that's such a good point that you have to meet your clients at their starting point. And we are all pretty much global organizations. And where someone is starting on this journey in the West is very different. Or if we call it global North, global South, if you're talking about a frontier economy versus one that's a middle income, high growth economy, these are very different propositions. And I think it's very instructive. And I'm glad you brought up the point, is that we need to make sure as we are on this journey together that we don't end up preaching or foisting some of the sustainability agenda onto those, and instead hear where they're coming from and help them along the journey. So even in something like the coal statement, it wasn't we are dumping you tomorrow because you're in dirty coal. It is we think this is the future for you. We're helping you to create jobs of the future. We want to finance that transition in an orderly way that makes sense for all of us without compromising the growth aspirations of those companies and those economies. So it's a subtle point, but it's a really important point. I'm glad you brought it up.
Thank you. That's great. Amy, you're off mute.
Yeah, I'm happy to share as well. So, when you look at what we do as an organization ourselves, business travel is really heavily what drives our emissions, right? And so we've had to take a hard look at what do we do, and we're a people business, and there's real benefit in getting together, whether it's with us or with our clients. So we've done some things like our travel system includes nudging. If you're booking a flight where you could be on a train, you get a notice. We give people scorecards around what they're not only what you're spending, are you booking your travel early enough to save things like that, but it also has your own carbon emissions. And then we're looking at things like training, where in the past we would have brought everyone together from the US or everyone together from a broad, geography to see, can we get the same benefit to our people, but can we do it in a way where maybe it's more hubs? And so you're not generating that same need for air travel that you otherwise would. But some of these things also, once you implement them, you realize kind of the things you missed, right? We've all talked about how complex. I had a colleague reach out to me recently because we can be road warriors, right, in this business. And so we do have a program for frequent travelers where they get some additional benefits where just to make life on the road a little bit easier. Well, what we found out is that we count airline miles towards that, but we don't count train miles towards that designation. And, so little things like that, where we have to make sure that all the way through we are incenting things that are beneficial for our carbon footprint, but also taking in mind our people's needs.
Great. Jen, do you want to comment on that? And Marisa, I just might ask you to respond to Jay's metric point in the chat, because I'm not sure we'll get around to that one as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, actually what Marisa shared definitely resonates. I think that we are also very committed to meeting clients where they're at. And while we have developed some fossil fuel policies, I think we're at this point now where we really feel that, we want to share more about what we will do than versus what we won't do. We want to be able to join our clients and support them where they are on their journey. Because again, like when we're helping them to advance their journey, that in turn allows us to, advance our own sustainability journey. And so I think that really ties very closely to our purpose.
Yeah, lovely. And you know what kind of is interesting listening to all of us speak, and I'm not sure how explicitly we've kind of pulled this out, is, we all represent B2B organizations. And there was a point in time where if you asked us what our impact was, we'd say it's how we light and heat our offices, maybe our volunteering programs and fundraising and our business travel. And that doesn't work anymore. We all know that our reach is through the work we do with our clients, looking at our portfolios, at serviced emissions, at how we mobilize supply chains. And so I think that brings us nicely to this question from Joe Harvey, which is, if you're a small organization, what are some basic steps you can look at to, start the journey? And I'd probably add to that, really make an impact.
Maybe I can start there because I feel like, our sustainability efforts started very much at a grassroots level. It was a small group of colleagues that got together probably, 10 plus years ago that recognized opportunities for us to begin operating more sustainably. And really, it was very bottom up. And I think that has just kind of grown and formalized over time organically throughout the company. And now it's really more of a formal part of our organization. But I think kind of getting back to really understanding and having clarity on your purpose is so important because, we can't solve every problem. I think that we have to get really clear as companies on, what are those key issues that really align with who we are as organizations, where we have the talent and the skill set, the resource to really address those challenges in a meaningful way. But get really clear and, don't bite off more than we can chew and get very focused. And to me, that really is how we can begin to move the needle on some of these issues, or as organizations, even if you're a smaller company.
Great, Marisa.
So sorry, I was furiously typing to try to respond to that question in the chat. So I would say, in many respects, it starts with if you look deep into the strategy, what drives your business and your company in the first instance, because this can't be divorced. I think you've heard very eloquently from my partners that this purpose and the sustainability mission is authentic to who you are as a company and what drives your business. So I'd start there and then set an ambition for yourself and contextually. So it's got to be ambitious but achievable. Those are two things that go hand in hand in my mind. You have to believe that you can get there. And it's going to be different depending on who you are and what you do as an organization. But once you put it out there, what I find is that's your rallying cry to galvanize the organization. And there's this little phrase that we like to use in our organization, a race to the top, that you do put it out there and you find this energy comes through your company, and people are constantly, at least as a CSO, maybe on the recipient point or the focal point, but throwing in ideas and good ideas. There's no luck on good ideas in the C-suite, right? A lot of this bubbles up from our younger generation, who then, when you respond to that, they feel so excited that they are actually helping to drive change in the organization, and then you create that deep connectivity to the point of, how do you mobilize employees? But it's also clever ideas. It's some of our younger population who are thinking about solutions provisions for clients around what we generally do. We are financial services providers. We provide financing products, but they say, what about a sustainability variant on this that solves this problem? And then we start to whiteboard something like this, and then magically it becomes a new product and a service to our clients. So it's this sort of a thing that gets you on the journey, no matter what size company you are. There is, of course, a cost to this, right? There's an investment cost in theory, but I think if you tap into intellectual capital, that's a pretty cheap cost, right? It's not always, a big CapEx number. A lot of times it's just, thinking a bit differently about how you serve your clients or your markets.
Wonderful. And on that cost point, I'm just going to bring us into kind of wrapping up, because I think that raises something really interesting. Between us, we have quite a finance, accounting heavy background. I'm kind of laughing. Jay's on this call, who did my first ever carbon accounting training in 2010. So hi. So in sustainability, we've got kind of ESG alphabet soup, same in finance. We can be super jargon heavy. I recently ran a workshop at global good kind of all-day conference on how to excite your CFO about purpose, and we were totally flabbergasted that it was kind of oversubscribed, standing room only, because everyone's in the room going, we want to make more input, our CFO doesn't really agree with what we're doing, how do we get more budget? So I'd love to just wrap up and close on, for everyone here and all the change makers in the audience, what advice would you give them to help make a really powerful business case for impact to the board? And Amy, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so it's an excellent question. And my station goes back a little bit to one of my earlier responses, how I try to boil it down to what are the business issues. And I think one of the biggest things is to focus on what are you hearing from your external stakeholders. And a lot of times we think about that in the investment community and others, and that's an important group. But if you boil it down to what are you hearing from your customers and what are you hearing from your employees by way of what you need to do, it creates a very clear business case. So I use that statistic about how many clients we've heard from. What I do when I talk about, our focus on sustainability with our broader leadership community, those that aren't living this every day, right, is that I really hone in on these are the clients that we're hearing from, and this is what they expect of us. And when you turn it into that and market opportunity, the business case for what we're investing in becomes really clear and also very hard to dispute. And then one last thing, I know geography and things come into play, but oftentimes our biggest clients who are making some of the most significant asks of us on these topics are US companies, and so I think oftentimes people think, oh, that's an issue for Europe, but it really isn't the case when you get down to the facts.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe to build off of what Amy shared, I do think that as we think about, corporate purpose and it's really being the essence of a company, it's our stakeholders that really have high expectations and actually increasingly requirements of how we're going to deliver, whether those are policymakers, current or future workforce, customers, investors. And so I think when companies can really articulate very clearly their purpose and then help their employees to really get behind it in a meaningful way, they're much better positioned to draw on that intangible link that pulls an organization together. And then I believe that kind of ultimately leads to a more sustainable, long-term outcome and success. And I think that that's really something that resonates with the board. But I think that, really like Amy shared, I mean, have to think about, what are your stakeholders asking for and how does that align directly with your purpose? And to me, that's how you kind of build that business case.
Wonderful. And Marisa?
Slightly different variation on the theme, but I would ask myself if I were presenting to the board, what is their primary purpose? On the one hand, it's to help identify risks in your organization and mitigate risk, and oversee that and ensure that you are well equipped to mitigate risk, and also oversee strategy, which I view in the camp of opportunity. So if I were presenting to the board any case, I would always say, with that framing in mind, is what I'm proposing, is it making a case for risk avoided or management of risk? And the other side of that is, or am I making a case for an opportunity that's dropping to the bottom line? Both of those drop to the bottom line, one because you're avoiding costs and one because you're generating revenues. But if you can frame it in that way, I think that is a way for your board to embrace. And I would emphasize, I would never make the case that this is a tax on the business. It is one of those two things. It is, if we pursue this sustainability agenda, we're going to avoid, physical risk or loan exposures to physical risk, or this is the biggest investment opportunity in history because, the global transformation is going to require billions and billions of capital. Guess what we do? We're a bank and we provide capital. If we're on this and ahead of the game and we're appreciating that opportunity, this is a massive thing for our organization. And then you have to bring it back to how is it core to your strategy at the end of the day as well? Because if it's wildly divorced, some off thing that is so far away from the core of the strategy, I think rightfully so, the board's going to say, is this a folly? Or is this something that, that you can act on? Or are you asking me for the blessing to go off on, some tangent? But I think most of us here on this call, what have we said? This is core to our strategy. Sustainability is core to our strategy, and it's re-emphasizing that every time.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think if I was to take away kind of a few of the richness we've covered today, it is that we need aligned purpose, sustainability, and commercial strategy. Now is the time to be brave and bold in our leadership as individuals and as corporate stewards. And just to constantly remind ourselves, change is made by humans, by employees, by the people in our ecosystem. So we need to empower them with the right tools to make change. Amy, Jen, Marisa, thank you. That was absolutely fantastic. I learned so much from you. Tamara, I'll just pass back to you for a couple of closing remarks.
Yeah, no, really, we're at the top of the hour. So really just to echo thanks to our panelists and Louisa, to you for taking us through the session today and really, bringing it to life. It was incredibly interesting, insightful. Thanks to all of you for joining as well. And I hope you come back for the next iteration in a couple of months. So thanks everyone very much. Take care.
Thanks and happy Earth Day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.